This is the Bob Davis Podcast YouTube channel. So, welcome. This is the first YouTube video that I've done here in 2024. And actually, I have done 3 audio podcasts since the last video. I did do a short on New Year's Eve, and my intention was to do a longer video, but, New Year's, the whole 9 yards. So I just wanted to come on and do a longer form video for you guys after finishing 3 podcasts and just talk about those podcasts. Why am I doing this? And I don't like to do this at the beginning of the videos because I want to get right into the topic, which is going to be how do you assess your nomad state of mind here in Quartzsite or wherever you nomads that are watching this are. But I want to give you a little background. I did 2 podcasts at the end of the year. I have a podcast that I always do at the end of the year. At the end of every year on New Year's Eve, I do sort of a gratitude report thanking people who have donated to the Bob Davis Podcast, supporting this podcast and this effort with money or some gesture or something that deserves a significant thank you, as well as people that I advertise on the audio podcasts. Generally speaking, I do not put them in the YouTube videos. We'll see about that going forward, but for the time being, no. And this channel isn't monetized, so, the ads are at the beginning, but you shouldn't be seeing ads pop up through the middle of it. I don't know if they are or they aren't, but when I've watched them, I haven't seen any, and I like that. So there's a lot there at the beginning that has nothing to do with the overall topic, but I do want to let you know that the YouTube videos are designed to let people know I've done a podcast. I have not traditionally worn headphones in these videos, because, it's a different medium from audio. But I put the headphones on at the beginning to let you know that I've just finished an audio podcast. Some people say on YouTube, and I don't want to get a bunch of comments about, hey, I don't listen to audio podcasts because I like seeing the person. That's fine. You don't have to listen to audio podcasts. I do these videos to draw attention to and to grow the audio podcast, which I have done since 2009. I've been podcasting. So this is why we have 1,100 or more podcasts, and we are on podcast 1127. So I do one thanking everybody, and then the next one I did, the 1126, podcast 1126 is really a review of all the places I've been this year traveling. I run a lot all over the country regularly, and if fuel was cheaper, I would run a lot more. So I wanted to talk about the many places that I visited, and I'll probably get into some of that in this video. And then finally, the most recent podcast that I did, which really this is germane to, was a podcast asking the question and sort of answering the question, how do you assess your state of mind? So I don't suffer from depression. I don't get depressed. I get frustrated. I get snippy, and I get restless. Those are probably the restlessness and the frustration is probably the most significant emotional output that I have in terms of nomad life, in terms of what I do, and I get frustrated and I get restless because I like to travel. I like to see new things. I like to go places. And much of this experience for people who aren't nomads, people who are, this experience in many ways is like a dream. So I have to regularly run through an assessment of what my state of mind is, because it's easy to get lost and get confused and lose track of the mission. And you might say, well, you're a nomad and you're living in the desert and, you're out here in Quartzsite with the rest of us. What do you mean mission? Well, I'm a content creator. I create podcasts, I write, I create videos. And this is what I do. And to the extent that they're monetized, in terms of advertising support or client support or people donating, that's basically a job. That's what I do out here, and it's what I've done since I was 13 years old. So this is my natural state, is to be a creator. I create, and my mission originally, when I first started doing Nomad stuff, before I left entirely, sold everything 4 years ago, and came out here, um, I've been traveling since I bought Mobile Podcast Command for $4,000 in 2014. The first trip was February of 2015, and I started just gallivanting around the country. And the idea was that I was going to follow news stories and go where news stories are happening. And I would go out for a month or two at a time, and I would come back. And it took me, well, 5 years, roughly late 2019, early 2020, where I started to say, why am I coming home? Why am I paying rent? That's all part of the story, which I've told many times in different podcasts. And so I started traveling a long time ago, and I find that I'm happiest when those wheels are rolling and I'm going to some new place, and I get frustrated because I want to go to some new places. Now, that doesn't mean places around Quartzsite. Like I've camped at Kofa, I've camped at Dome, I've camped at Pomosa, I've camped at Skadden Wash, and I prefer where I am now. But I don't mean visiting different people and going and camping in different places around here. I'm sure that going forward in future years, I will do that, and I will enjoy the experience of camping around this area. But what I mean is traveling thousands of miles and seeing new places and rolling into towns where I know I've been from a different direction. So aside from the fact that it is a dreamlike existence out here, and our perception of time is flawed, because sometimes time seems like it's going really fast, and you go, what day is it? And it's like Monday. Or you say, time seems like it's going really slow, and you go, what day is it? And they're like, it's Friday. And it's like, it's Friday. What? And I mean, everybody I know out here has that same experience where we are surprised at what day it is for whatever reason. So I find that it's easy to get lost, and then that's when I start to get frustrated, and I get bored. And in this podcast, 1127, which is Nomad State of Mind 2024, it's important at the beginning of the year, I think, as just a sort of a planning exercise to say, okay, let's root on what day it is, what time it is, where we are in time, January 1st or 5th or whatever it is, 2024. And let's take stock. Let's take stock of what's going on. How are you doing at what you're doing? Why are you doing it? Do you want to keep doing it? Do you get something out of doing it? And of course, at the end of the podcast, I talked about, really, as a content creator, I love making videos and I love making podcasts and I love that process. It gets harder and harder and harder to find topics that I haven't done. So sometimes it takes me a while, and I get that sort of frustration, or I guess you could say it's a form of writer's block, just a general frustration, and so I have to run through this process of well, what am I thinking when I'm thinking, and that has been my tried and true method really over the past 10 years, since 2015 or so. But really, 2018 going forward, my process for finding things to talk about was to just go sit on a hill and cross my legs and think about what I was thinking about. And the more people I talk to, the more I find that is apparently, it's an unusual thing for people to do, to actually sort of tune into, if you will, that stream of thought that you are having internally. Heart, mind, consciousness, subconsciousness. Where are these messages coming from? Where are these ideas coming from? And the more I would sort of plumb the depths, the better I felt about the topics that I was coming up with. So that's quite a labor sometimes when you've done over 1,000 podcasts in it, and it hasn't been a podcast that you did 10 years ago, a series of podcasts on a particular subject, and then another series on another subject or something to that effect. It's been a stream of consciousness podcast since the very beginning, the audio podcast. And, so far, the YouTube channel has been the same thing. I don't go out and do production video. Why? Because this is the easiest thing for me to do after producing a podcast, and after sometimes writing it, sometimes outlining it, sometimes doing it 2 or 3 different times. It gets to be, a bit much. So what I've started to do is really do stream of consciousness stuff, and I find that in this environment, it's really, really, really important to know one's state of mind. I don't want to say you. I want to say my state of mind, one's state of mind, because I want to be very careful about saying your state of mind, because only you really understand your state of mind. And the question of this last podcast was, how do we assess it? And it's important that we are aware of our state of mind out here. This is supposed to be an experience of awareness. This is supposed to be an experience where you don't have to tell yourself to look at the sunset. I came to Arizona partially because, I was raised with Arizona highways, and I remember, the beautiful sunset pictures. And so I have to remind myself sometimes, by the way, turn around. There's a beautiful sunset going on, and you're sitting here thinking about something else, and you're not paying any attention to this thing that you came out here for. And I know I'm rambling a little bit, but that's okay. So the point being, how do you assess your state of mind? And I have, I'm just going to cut right to the chase because I think this is really important. I have developed over time sort of a little checklist about how I determine my state of mind. And a lot of it has to do with how clean is this truck? Am I keeping clean myself? Am I brushing my teeth? How am I eating? What am I eating? What am I thinking about? Am I sleeping too much or am I sleeping not enough? All of these very basic things. Do I have everything I need? I don't know about you, but I will put off going to Walmart up in Parker because it's a long, big thing. And Walmart's where, I get all the staples. So the question is, what are the metrics that you use to determine your state of mind? Do you have clean clothes? Do you have new clothes? New enough that they're not, falling. I mean, I've literally had pairs of pants out here that I've just recently thrown away that were quite old and literally falling off my body because I wore them so long. I mean, wore the knees out, wore the pants out. I had a pair of Carhartt pants. It broke my heart to throw them away, but I had to because they were, you could see my ass in the back, and I didn't even know it. I was like, I reached back there at one point and was like, oh my God, there's holes in. People can see my ass. So I finally had to throw them away, and I bought these new Wrangler Rangers up at the Walmart for like $29. They're great. So I've got a couple pairs of those, and I got some military pants and stuff. So I've got, relatively new clothes. So these are all things that we need to stay aware of. That I'm getting messages on my phone. Sorry. That we need to stay aware of in order to maintain a certain state of mind so that we can focus on the mission. Now, what do you mean, Bob Davis, focusing on the mission? What the hell are you talking about? Well, for me, it's content creation. But the situation that we all have been dealing with, if we're out here, the situation that we have been dealing with for the past 2 years is really inflation, where things have gotten really expensive, and it affected fuel prices. Now, fuel prices are starting to come down a little bit. That's great. And I don't want to get into an economic podcast because we're not ready to do that right now. But I feel like we are about to hit that fulcrum turning point. I don't know what's going to trigger it, but I do feel that things are going to change. So what I've been doing is I've been observing, orienting, deciding, and then acting on those decisions, and then running back through that loop over and over again. And when I observe, it's, well, what's changed? What situation is going on? And then when I orient, it's like, what am I going to do with that information? What do I do if fuel prices are high? Which is, well, what you end up doing is you end up sitting. You end up sitting in the desert, because you don't want to expose yourself to high fuel prices or high food prices. So what do? Well, you can buy in bulk, but we can't do that because we would fill up our vehicles with food, right? You can simply not go anywhere. You can not eat as much, or you can eat cheaper things, and most importantly, you don't go anywhere because you don't travel, because that's the biggest cost center for nomads. And if you're going to run this like a business, that's your biggest cost center. So one of the observations was 2 years ago, fuel prices are ridiculously high. What's the orientation? Don't go anywhere. What's the decision? I'm going to sit here at Dome, or I'm going to sit here at Plamosa, or I'm going to sit here at Tyson's South, or whatever, Tyson's West, or Tyson's Wash, or I'm going to sit at some campground, and that's where I'm going to sit until the situation changes. That's what we've been doing. That's what I've been doing. So in the summer, I drive back up to Wisconsin, and I did still travel a ton last summer. I went to New Hampshire, so I went from here in March of last year in 23. I drove up to Wisconsin in March. It was still snowing. We still had snowstorms yet to go when I got there on April 1st. Basically bivouacked in a shed, hooked up to shore power for more than a month before I could get down to the flat by the lake where I could have a fire every day. And then I spent the summer sitting out there in front of the fire. I had a fantastic summer, but I didn't go anywhere. I sat, and this is when you rest, you refit, you look for things, and you also do that again in the winter. So after I was in Wisconsin, I drove out to New Hampshire. I had a fabulous, and I talked about this in podcast 1125, just an incredible experience traveling through the Midwest, skirting all the major cities like threading a needle at the peak of the growing season. It was really, truly incredible. Driving through these little farm towns, never once in a major city, all through Wisconsin, Minnesota for a minute, Iowa for a minute, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, upstate New York, all the way out to New Hampshire. Went to a great wedding, had a great, breakfast on the shores of the Atlantic at Rye Beach in New Hampshire, and then near Portsmouth, and then back across Massachusetts down into upstate New York for a short period of time, then down into Pennsylvania, on down to West Virginia, and then out and across through Oklahoma to Arizona and Texas, New Mexico, and so forth. That's kind of reverse, but New Mexico, Texas, New Mexico. I really wasn't in Texas for long. I ended up in, and I forgot all about Arkansas. So I had an incredible summer, but then you come out here and you sit. And so we do the same thing, putting some solar on the roof of the vehicle, so I can charge my power station back there. I don't know if you can see it, as well as some other things. Probably going to get an oil change, maybe some tires before it's time to go. So it's sitting for a long time, saving money, and then refitting, and then going back out again. In March this year, I'm headed out to Florida for another wedding. My niece is getting married, and then I don't know what I'm going to do after that. I have some things I have to do in Virginia, and then probably back up to Wisconsin. But I'm sure as hell not going to Wisconsin in April either, because I remember what happened last year. It's just up north, man. The weather is nuts, and it's beautiful here, even though you can probably still hear the wind in the background. The podcast I just did I did it during the peak of the windstorm, and it was great because you could hear that wind throughout the entire podcast. So that was kind of neat. So those are the things I've been talking about in the last 3 podcasts or so. Gratitude, sort of a travel log of the places that I've been and what I have gathered from those travels. And then this whole process of kind of staying on an even keel when you're out here in Quartzsite or down the way in Yuma, wherever you guys are, whether you're RV, nomads and going back to Detroit or something for the summer, or whether you're in some other kind of vehicle and you're just wandering around. My issue, as I said, was why am I paying rent and why am I coming home? So when I cut the cord and I just blew it all off and started doing this, it was really a significant thing for me. And I'm so glad I did it. I still, even on the toughest days, and there are always tough days doing this because it's hard. I mean, people think this is easy. There are days that are really, really difficult. I passed some people on the highway the other day in a really old Dodge based Class C, and they were pulled over and they were sort of canted over on the side of 95, and I thought it's kind of not a safe place to be. Wonder what's going on there. Well, they had mechanical issues, and so those days are, it's hard to keep an even keel when you're having problems. I mentioned in one of the podcasts that the other day I was setting up. Somebody gave me a really nice 200-watt solar panel, and I was setting up and I wasn't aware. I wasn't in a present state of mind. Like, what are you doing? And every time I have a problem, or I do something stupid, this drives me crazy. It's like, what are you thinking about? You have to keep your wits about you. And I knocked the panel over and, it falls on the rocks. That's it. It's shattered. It still works, but not as well as it did. And then the other day I was throwing my garbage away at South, which, no, it wasn't South. It was what we refer to as gym land, which is the fake assistant ranger that rides around and tags everybody for having or not having tags, the LTVA stickers. And I got hung up on that concrete wall by the dumpster, and I ripped a bunch of trim off this thing, and I had to take it up to Best Auto, and they did a great job putting it back on, and I got one more thing I got to do. So, presence of mind. And here's the thing that drove me crazy. I knew that wall was there, and I knew I had to avoid the wall, and yet I pulled over a little bit further to avoid something else was sticking out of the berm there that you drive up to get to the thing to throw away the garbage, and I got too far over, and I wasn't paying attention. And so I was talking to the check-in woman at Best, and I said, God, I feel like an idiot, And she goes, my husband did some crazy thing, the same thing. It happens to everybody. But again, it's about being present, in the present moment. Normally, we're in a trance. Back in the world especially, we're in a trance. We don't even remember how we got to work that morning. Sometimes I'd get to work and I'd be at work. I had to get to work at 6 o'clock in the morning for a long time. So I moved really close to the place I worked, and I would get in there at 6 o'clock, do what I had to do. And then later in the morning, I could not remember the route that I took to work. And my friend Don, the hypnotist, says that that's actually, you're in a trance. Because when you do a series of by rote tasks, and I like by rote tasks, because when you do routines, you do them the same way every day. I make coffee the same way. I take my trash the same time. I do all these things at the same time. Well, what happens is you stop thinking about what you're doing because you're literally in a trance state. That's when your mind is running free and you're thinking about stuff, and you're not, you're not paying attention to literally what you're doing. That's when you make mistakes. So presence of mind is a discipline. It's difficult to do because it's easy for us to do rote tasks as human beings. We just follow the rote task. And you can create habits for yourself and do the habits. You don't have to stay and be stuck with one habit. But once you develop routines, it's easier because you could just do the routines. Well, then your mind starts to wander. See, and out here, your mind wanders. Next thing you know, you're face down in the dirt, or you drop something, or you lose something, or whatever. So that's the reason for these other routines, which are checklists about where am I at, what am I doing, what am I thinking, how do I feel, and why. Because it's easy to get into a trance state where you're not paying attention to anything. And that's why I offered this up as something to talk about in a recent podcast, which is what is your Nomad state of mind in Quartzsite 2024. Okay? There's really not much else to talk about. Just now the wind is starting to die down, so I guess I can go into town and do the things I need to do. It's been a crazy windstorm. I had one of those cheap Walmart chairs, I don't know if I mentioned this, that the wind took it and just literally tore it apart. And then my friend Mike's solar panels, they were destroyed. Mine survived. But I'm solving that problem because in a couple of weeks I'm putting full solar on the top of Mobile Podcast Command, which is a big deal for me because I have to drill holes in the ceiling. And if you look back up here, this is a wiring channel, so we're not drilling any holes in the wiring channel, right? Because all my ambulance stuff works on this thing, so I don't want to mess that up. So Campulance Man, take that. And a shout out to Dave. All right. That's about all I got. Check out the Bob Davis Podcast at thebobdavispodcasts.com or subscribe to them on iTunes or Google Podcasts or Spotify. There's plenty of other sources that have them. I got to update the website with links to the big ones. If you like audio podcasts, please check out the podcasts. If you don't and you just like watching YouTube, you don't have to make a comment telling me that. I know that there are people that don't listen to audio podcasts that watch YouTube. I create different content for each. I create different content for YouTube than I create for the audio podcast that I create for other things. And as far as social media is concerned, for all the platforms that I'm on, I create different content for each platform. So you are not going to see the same content on Facebook that you see on LinkedIn. I don't even ask me about LinkedIn. I don't know why. Why? Why LinkedIn? But anyway, or the two Facebook pages that I have, or Instagram, different content, different platforms. So that's why the audio podcast is different. In fact, it's interesting to me because I don't know which content I like better now, the YouTube videos or the audio podcast, but they are different and they're a different approach. And I really like making both. So I don't want to go on too much longer, but thanks for watching the YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Please hit like. I'm very happy with people in Quartzsite and environs watching the YouTube videos. But in addition to you people out there in the world of YouTube, it isn't just Quartzsite. And my content isn't just Nomad content, although I am a nomad. So a lot of it is related to what I do. And you'll see different kinds of content about stuff in the world on the YouTube channel, and certainly you will hear it in the Bob Davis Podcasts on audio at thebobdavispodcast.com, iTunes, Spotify, etc. So subscribe here, subscribe to the Bob Davis Podcast on iTunes. That really helps the channel. And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the Bob Davis Podcast, and have a great windy day. Bye-bye.